and I played the whole time.
Cool.
So whether like I played on piano, I played guitar, I played the goosang, I played percussion for some things.
Hello and welcome back to this week's episode of the TF Cast. I'm your host, Willis Stout.
Hey, Grum here, and the date is June 21st.
And I am your host, Jacob Bases. Today we are so pleased to introduce singer-songwriter and multi-instrumentalist Beret Finken to talk about her new album, Change with the Seasons. Beret, if you could introduce yourself to the audience and tell us a little bit about your album and how you got introduced to music.
Hi, I'm Beret Finken. I'm working on an original album right now called Change with the Seasons. I have been doing music pretty much my whole life. Both my parents are musical. I grew up with music, obviously. My mom writes music and plays music. She plays guitar, flute, sings. She was in choir for a number of years. I've actually sung in choir with her. And my dad, he actually has Orin Instruments in St. Peter right now. That's my dad, Eric Orin.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah. And so he has always played and written music, and just a few years ago went and became a luthier. So now he does instrument repairs, builds guitars, banjos, stuff like that. And so I come from a family of songwriters and singers and instrumentalists, and so it was kind of not an option to not do music. It's always been the right thing for me. So the album I'm working on right now is kind of a compilation of, so there's 11 songs on the album, and the oldest song on the album I wrote 10 years ago, actually, like in high school. And so for the longest time, I'd been wanting to make an album. It's sort of always been a dream of mine to have music out there in the world for people to listen to. And I've always loved albums. I just love I love individual songs, but just putting an album of music together is so satisfying too, just how everything works together. And so these songs I've written are kind of taken from my own life over the past, 10 years. So starting from when I was a teenager, there'll be things like, there's a song about like a breakup. It's really over dramatic, but my songwriting evolves from there. Like in college, there are some experiences like I was in a play and I wrote a song about that, sort of roughly. And I have a song about marriage and a song for my kids, because I have two little boys now. They're 4 and 1. And so the album is kind of just about my growth as a person over the last decade, and just all the life experiences I've had since then. And it really focuses on change. And one of the things I've really come to learn over the last few years since becoming a mom really is like the significance of change and how everything changes. And like, as much as you want your kids to stay young forever, that's not going to happen. And it's important to be able to change with each season in your life, and really just enjoy where you're at, and whatever comes next, be able to roll with that, because life is forever going to be changing. So that's kind of...
That was a very thorough introduction. I feel like we could almost wrap right there.
We've only just started.
No, thank you. Is this your first work of recorded material that you're going to be releasing then, or have you released previous to this?
Yeah, so I actually have a few singles out right now. I released my first song at the beginning of 2020. It was a song I wrote for my husband, actually. It's called Until You Come Back Home. And re-recorded this song. It's going to be the last song on my album. So I've got the single out right now, and then new recording of it. But that song that I wrote for him, he's in the military, just National Guard, but he's still gone a lot. So he's gone 1 weekend a month. He does like a 3-week training in the summer, and then he actually was deployed for a year when our oldest was a year old. And so the first time we were apart, we had kind of just started dating, and he had to go to basic training, which is like 3 months.
Yeah.
And I'd never been in a long distance relationship before, and so it was really hard. And I was still kind of like, I wasn't a teenager, but it was that sort of young love, like everything is dramatic and like everything's the end of the world. Like being apart from him was, felt like I was gonna die. And so I just wrote this song for him. It's a really simple song about patiently waiting and how I'm still gonna be here whenever he comes back. And so that's the first song I ever released, and then I released a few more songs that year. I've got a couple covers out. One's a Billy Joel cover. Another one's a cover by a Danish artist. And then, so that Danish artist song is, my styles kind of vary. So I do a lot of singer-songwriter type stuff, but in college, my college major is actually music and theater. And so if I hadn't like gotten married and had a kid right out of college, I was thinking about composing music for theater. And so I've got that kind of more like classical background too, and I love world music. And so some of the stuff that I write is like foreign language, because I've taken some different language classes in school before, like Japanese. I took Japanese.
Wow.
I've taken Norwegian, so I've written 2 songs like in Japanese and Norwegian.
Cool.
And so one of the other songs I have released is in Norwegian, and it's very like kind of different than the other stuff I write. But so anyway, I have more things released.
stuff
I'm on
out.
Spotify and stuff. So if you want to listen to me, I'm already up there.
You took a year of Norwegian and then wrote songs in Norwegian. Is that what happened?
Kind of.
Wow. A lot of people take like 4 years of a language class and then can't order a cup of coffee at the
Well, okay. So I'm not like fluent by any means. But when I kind of discovered that when I'm learning a language, it helps me retain it better when I start writing in it, whether it's writing like poetry or just sentences or music.
Yeah.
So most of like the 2 songs I've written are just like basic phrases kind of, but like if you're not fluent in those languages, you wouldn't know the difference, and they still sound cool. So that's
neat.
Yeah. And for the Norwegian one, I'm like super Scandinavian. And so I've always felt really connected with like my Norwegian heritage, and I kind of wanted to connect with that more when I wrote that song in Norwegian. It's called Reven, which means the fox in Norwegian. So, yeah.
When did you start writing, and was writing something that you did as a family? You in your introduction, you kind of talked about how much your family was doing, how much music was happening with your family, but what was that musical practice like within the family when you were growing up?
Yeah, so I got into writing music mostly on my own after I started taking piano lessons. I started taking piano when I was, I think, 5. And it kind of started as just like plunking around on the piano and seeing what sounded cool. And I would play things by ear. So I would start like essentially arranging music by ear, which turned into writing my own stuff. But I can't remember. My parents mostly just played stuff. My mom wrote more when she was younger. So like when she was a teenager, she wrote a lot of songs. But she never like recorded them. Well, she did, but it was on like a little tape recorder. And she would like overdub herself on the tape recorder, and that's kind of all she has. And I want her to record her music because it's good stuff and it's something I would like to have. And same with my dad. But my dad didn't really start writing or like get really into writing until the last, I don't know, probably decade, I guess. And so it was mostly like I listened to a lot of music because my parents did, and I was just around it so much. But the writing was more something I discovered on my own, I think.
Did you hear Eric's rendition of Hush Little Baby that he played at Minnesota Original Music Fest last year?
Actually, I don't think so.
Oh man, it's amazing. It's like a creepy version of this. It's like a minor creepy version. It's amazing. It was so good. It was my favorite song at the event.
That's so cool. I will have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
I was supposed to reach out to him about being on the pod. If you're listening to this, you're supposed to be on the podcast like a while ago.
Yeah, I'll reach out to him and tell him to do that.
Yeah.
Come on, Dad.
So you're doing an album right now. What part of the process are you in now? For that.
So I'm kind of halfway through recording right now.
Okay.
Everything's written, which is great because it took a long time to like get to that point where I felt like I had enough material to make an album. And I'm actually recording with Scott Helgerson at Audio Atelier, his studio down in North Mankato. And the way we've been recording is just like each individual part at a time. So I sent him all my like piano files because we're just doing MIDI for those. Makes it easier because I can't. It's just time consuming, and I already had them like recorded.
Yeah.
So sent him all those, so we didn't have to worry about recording any piano. And then I recorded guitar with him. And we've got almost all the lead vocals recorded. There's one song we still have to record lead vocals for. I got cello recorded for 2 songs. There's going to be a couple more with cello. And then we just have like the harmony parts to record, and then we're pretty much done. So,
Cool.
so I guess we're about halfway. One thing with me is that I record a lot of harmony parts. I love layered harmonies. It's just my favorite thing. So that might take a little longer than...
Are you doing a lot of those yourself?
Yes. Yeah,
Cool.
this is all me. I mean, it's not all me because Scott has done so much. And I'm so appreciative of his willingness to help me with this project because I kept telling myself like, oh, I'll just record everything on my own. I'll do this whole project by myself. And it never happened because I didn't have anyone keeping me accountable. And it's also really hard to find time to record or space to record when you've got, I'm a full-time stay-at-home mom, and I've got 2 little boys, loud little boys running around all day. And so it just was not realistic to expect that I could do it all at home in my own space like that. But I'm really pleased with the progress we're making, and hopefully going to release October 12th.
Cool. And you're doing an exciting like fundraising campaign alongside that too. Can you share a little bit about that maybe?
Yeah, so right now, through July 7th, I have a Kickstarter project running. And for those of you who are not familiar with Kickstarter, it's a crowdfunding platform. So creators can put their projects up on Kickstarter with like a certain budget that they're trying to raise by the end of the project or by the end of the campaign. And people can pledge a certain amount of money. Like creators come up with like reward tiers with things that people can pledge for. So like, for example, I have a reward tier that's like, you can pledge $25 and you get a CD and a sticker and whatever. But there's like a whole bunch of options like that. It's kind of customizable for like whatever you want. So you're not pledging for nothing. You will get stuff if you pledge, and the project goes through. The kicker with Kickstarter is that it's all or nothing. So if you don't raise all the funds you need by the end of the project, you walk away with nothing. Which also means that if you backed my project and it doesn't succeed, then you won't get charged anything. So like you won't be out money if the project doesn't happen. But I would really like it to. So with the Kickstarter, I am raising money to produce CDs, just because they're a really great thing to have available at shows. They're just an easy thing to like give people. And then you have my music. And so CDs, it's also going to raise money for the distribution of the music online. So to be able to put it up on like Spotify and other streaming platforms. And then I also would like to make a little bit of merchandise because I've never done that before, and I think it would just be a cool thing to have along with the album. So I want to make a few t-shirts, some stickers because those are easy, some lyric posters. I made this cool design from lyrics for one of my songs. It's just like a poster that you can put up. I know some people are like really into lyric posters, so it's like, let's do that. And then songbooks, because one of the things I really loved to do in college was notate my music, and because then I could actually have like people play my stuff. So I've been working on notating all the songs for my album. And the songbook would consist of like all the piano parts, guitar chords, the melody line, and lyrics to every song on the album. So I think it would just be really cool to have my music physically available. You know, it just be so cool.
Like I love CDs and I love being given albums, but like if any artist had all their music just in a book when I showed up to their show, like I feel like I would probably get that instead.
Yes, I know, it's so cool. Like I think so. I'm a huge like video game nerd, kind of. And I don't know if you are familiar with Legend of Zelda, but they had like their symphony concert. I mean, they're always doing symphony concerts, but it was like the 25th anniversary a couple of years ago. And they were selling like sheet music books at their concerts. And I totally, like if I'd have been able to go, I totally would have bought one. I know I have a friend who bought one and I was like, so jealous. But it's stuff like that a lot of artists don't do that would be so cool if they did, you know? So that's, I want to do that.
What's the name of the ukulele guy who's around here? Jeremy
Messersmith?
Is it Jeremy Messersmith?
I think so.
Yeah, he like comes through and he like teaches people to play his music and has them show up at the show, and like it's really interactive.
Yeah.
Cool.
And I feel like it just really works for him, and I think that's always a really great idea.
A lot of prog people put out books. The main place I've seen it is like jazz prog and like singer-songwriters, stuff like that. But yeah, I have one of Propagandhi as well. Yeah, no, but I really love that. I think that's a great idea. It's an easy way to like have something cool and let people learn your music and not just like listen to it or have to look up an Ultimate Guitar tab or something and learn the wrong way. Right.
Especially since I'm not super well known. Like my stuff is not going to be up online to learn.
Yeah.
So Yeah, it'd just be a really handy thing.
You can make a fake account and post pretending it's not you posting your own music on Ultimate Guitar. I'm sure people have done that.
Probably.
They're just posting their own tabs. Too,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
What is the experience of working with Kickstarter thus far been like for you? Has it been like a big series of chores, or is it fun? I don't know. I don't know anyone's ever kickstarted their album, you know?
Yeah. It's actually been a lot more complicated than I thought it was going to be. I'm not like a business person by any means. That's like the last thing on my mind. I just want to make music. But there are a lot of things you need to take into consideration when making a project on Kickstarter, because it's not just like, hey, buy my album, I have music, just like pledge. Because you have to, like, if you're making a physical product, you have to take into consideration shipping costs, shipping materials, taxes. And then like Kickstarter itself takes a cut just for using the platform. And then like they are partnered with Stripe so that people can use their cards. And so then they have to pay Stripe. So then you have to pay a fee to Stripe. And you also have to know ahead of time, like how much, like how many CDs are you going to order? How much is that going to cost? How many shirts are you going to order? Where are you going to order them through? So you have to find your vendors, how much all of that costs, how much shipping costs to like get you the stuff that you ordered that you're going to send to people. Because you need all that information to create your budget. So it was a lot of work that I was not expecting.
Yeah, a lot
and
of
so
details.
like I put in a lot of time just with researching all this stuff and making sure I have a plan if the project goes through. Like here I'm ordering things through here and here and here, and it's going to take this long to do it, and I should order by this date so that I have it by this date. A lot of planning ahead. And so that's kind of one of the reasons. I mean, of course, I just want the project to go through because like I want to do this, but I put in a lot of work with it, and it feels like it would kind of be a waste, like if it wasn't successful. So
I'm guessing you don't get.
tough.
Oh, sorry. I'm guessing you don't get any of that money back that you give to like Kickstarter and the cards things and stuff like that if it doesn't go through too, right?
well, the good thing about Kickstarter is that you don't have to pay them anything up front.
Oh.
So like you only have to pay them if the project is successful. So then you have to plan that amount in when you're creating your budget so that you have that money available at the end of the project.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far along on the Kickstarter are you? Where are we at now?
So I am halfway through the Kickstarter, and
Okay.
I'm almost halfway funded. Almost. I'm just a little bit shy of halfway. So
if people want to support, how do they find out more? Where can they go?
yeah, so just type in Kickstarter and search my name, and I'm sure you guys can like post a link to it, right?
Throw a link in there.
Yeah, it's super easy, and I've got a whole bunch of project details. You can read like my story, what the project's all about. You can learn about the songs on the album. I went into great detail with it so that there's no confusion. There's no like questioning, like, is this going to happen? Or like, what am I backing? It's all laid out super well for you. So yeah.
Yeah. Have you had previous experiences funding other people's Kickstarters at all, or are you pretty new to this? What's your exposure with that kind of thing?
I've actually backed, I think, 3 Kickstarters before, and one of them, well, 2 of them are actually recent. I backed a couple albums, actually, just because I love supporting, people who are just starting out and making their first albums, and it just feels really good to support fellow creators. And I actually got my rewards for one of them.
Nice.
So like she pulled through, and that was great. And then there's another one I just backed that she's kind of in like the beginning stages of recording. So the thing with Kickstarter is that like people can pledge, but sometimes creators like haven't made their stuff yet, and it's sort of, you have to trust that the creator is gonna follow through and do it.
Yeah.
So I backed a Kickstarter a couple years ago that didn't happen. Like, it was successfully funded, but it was a really big project and they ran out of money. And so like I didn't get anything back from it because they couldn't follow through, or like they're still trying to, but like it's just way past their deadline. But so it is a risk when you're backing a Kickstarter, but I feel like my project is small enough that like you can trust me to to get it done.
Yeah.
You heard it here, folks.
Yes. Trust
Yeah.
Beret Finken, everyone.
I've backed a video game before that when it came out, it was like obvious that they didn't put like any of the money into the actual game. And that was really frustrating. But I've also kickstarted a board game before that. Now I have like a collector's edition that you can't ever buy anymore. And you only got it on the Kickstarter. So I do love the website, but I have had both experiences. I've been totally burned giving $120 to someone for a game I never played. And then the other one was like $100, but that one was totally worth it. So yeah, I like Kickstarter.
Yeah.
Beyond the scope of this Kickstarter campaign, what are your musical aspirations?
I think, well, so the season of life I'm in right now is I'm a full-time mom, and I'm really thankful that I get to stay at home with my boys, and my husband works full-time and he provides for us so that I can stay home. And so right now, being a mom is my focus. And as much as I love music, it's more of like a side thing right now. And so as long as I still get to do music a little bit, like, you know, this is taking up a lot of my time right now just because I had my first son in 2019 and took a big break from music, and I wasn't doing much with it. And so now I'm kind of coming back from that after having my second son. And so like this is the year that I'm doing a lot of stuff, but then maybe after this, I'm gonna not do so much. I still love to perform around town. And I have discovered I also really like traveling too. I just this past weekend, I played a show in Decorah, Iowa. I love Decorah. So it was a nice treat to be able to go there. And I took my family with, and we just had a nice weekend. And the end of May, I performed in Wisconsin at a little coffee shop and loved that too. So that's kind of, and around town, I play at coffee shops like the Coffee Hag, and I've got a show coming up at the Fill-In Station because they're just now starting to do some music too. And those are the shows I really love to do, just because my music it's quiet, calming. It's more to be listened to rather than to like just be in the background at like a bar or something. And so I want to go play at places that people want to hear me and they just want to relax, have a coffee, something like that. So that's kind of what I want to do after this like whole crazy album thing is done. And then, you know, if I do a couple gigs a month, that's probably good for me for right now because it's not my season right now. I'm a mom, and that's what I need to focus on. And maybe like once they're school aged, I can try and not necessarily like make a living from it, but do it more. But right now, it's just a side thing, and that's okay.
Yeah.
2 gigs a month is nothing to balk at. You know, it's still quite a bit.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Also, I really do. Sometimes I think people get a little bit lost in the sauce on like the linear progression of a project. Like if you know playing wherever you are makes you happy and it brings joy to other people, like the stage you're on doesn't dictate the level of talent or like the enjoyment the audience gets in every circumstance. So I really appreciate, the idea that a performer is taking those stages where there might just be, 20 people there who are listening for their personal enjoyment as seriously as, someone who's aspiring to the largest stages in the world.
Mhm.
Yeah, because I mean that's basically, those are the stages that we do have in Mankato. We don't have super huge stages here generally.
Mhm.
They're harder too. It takes a lot more. Like I would rather play guitar for like 50,000 people than like 20, just because like they're like right there. You're in charge of your own sound. You're like, there's just way more variables. I kind of like the intensity of even doing those small shows.
Mhm.
For some reason, like playing at like a festival, it's like way less stressful for me because I know I'm gonna show up, do my songs. Half the people won't be listening to me. Like I don't know, just something about it.
Mhm.
Comedy is the same way. Me and Jacob do comedy. I would rather do comedy to like a bunch of people than like try to make like 5 people in a room laugh.
Or if someone's like, "Hey, tell me a joke."
Yeah.
Nah. Oh, yeah.
You've talked a bit about your family, your 2 boys, and in some of the songs you played earlier, I know there's some references to your parents, I think.
Mhm.
How does family and music connect for you? It seems like there's some interplay there. There's something strong connection. How do you think about like family and music, and how does it inspire your music?
Um, for me, my earlier songs were more about like the stage of life I was in. Because when you're a teenager, you're kind of off on your own, doing your own thing, and you don't necessarily care about your family, unfortunately. But since getting married and having kids, I've just really come to appreciate my own family. Like when I was in high school, my mom and I didn't get along. But since going to college and now being a mom myself, she loves the boys so much, and we've really connected, just as people and moms and friends since then. And I'm so thankful for the relationship I have with her. And so like she's inspiring to me, and like the song I wrote for my husband, like he's important to me, so I want to write about him, or I want to say something to him that is important. And with my kids too, there's a song on the album that is basically like a lullaby for my kids. And for the longest time, like after my first son was born, I was kind of like in a music slump, and I like wanted to write something for him, but it was hard for me at the time because I hadn't really figured out my place after having him. Like, who am I now? Because I'm still me, but now I'm a mom. And like just finding your place after having a child is really, really hard. So now that I've settled into that more, it was easier for me to figure out what I wanted to say in that song. So the song is called Hero's Lullaby, and it's essentially like telling my kids that I'm not like a superhero, but I will always be here for you. And it's a really poetic song, and I think the way I wrote it was kind of exactly the thing I was looking for. And it's really adorable, actually, because we've recorded like the piano and the guitar and the lead vocals for that song. And so like I'll play it on repeat to like try and work on like the harmony parts and stuff. And my oldest especially loves to listen, and he always, when that song comes on, he smiles and says, "This is my favorite one." And it just like it gets me because it's a song I wrote for him, you know? So I think, I don't know, a lot of the time I'll hear songs, like people always write love songs or like songs about heartbreak and stuff like that. And like those are great. But now that I have this different perspective on life and the people who are really important to me, like those are the things that I want to write about now. It's not like the super tough emotional stuff, but more just the season I'm in, just life, you know?
Sure. How do you approach writing a song in general? Like when you're trying to, are you coming from lyrics or melody, or what's your process?
Yeah, so usually I'll start out on either piano or guitar. I mostly used to write on piano, but then over the years I kind of picked up a guitar more because it's easier to bring around places. And it also helps you break out of like the same writing practices. So like if you're used to writing things on piano, you're going to end up writing a lot of like the same types of things. Whereas if you switch to guitar, you know, maybe it's more percussive and you can do a lot more like finger picking style or strumming, which you can't do on piano. And so then you come up with like different chord progressions or different like rhythmic varieties. And so I think that helps add some variety to my music if I switch it up sometimes. But usually I'll start with like a chord progression, and then if I've got that down, like sometimes I'll mess around with the melody, and then usually words come after that. So it's a lot of just experimenting for me, I think. And a lot of the time I will come into it with an idea for something I want to write, or like the way I wrote Harvest Widow was I was just so my husband, when he's not doing military stuff, he drives truck for Crystal Valley, and so which means he's gone a lot in the fall because they're doing like lots of grain trucking, and it's harvest season. And so once I described myself to a friend as, oh, I'm a harvest widow, and I was like, Harvest Widow, that'd be a really good title for a song. And so then it just like came from that one idea. But yeah, I can really come from anywhere, which is cool.
Sometimes it's a person, sometimes it's a guitar feeling, sometimes it's a piano. Nice. Do you have any songs from the album that like changed a lot, maybe in the recording process? Like you came into the recording process with one idea of how it was going to go, and then something happened. Now it's totally different, or is it, you know, you can stick pretty closely to your original vision?
Well, actually, so I wrote Hero's Lullaby, which I just talked about. I wrote that originally on guitar, but then we ended up recording it on piano instead because it just felt more like the mood I was going for. And there is a little bit of guitar with that song, but it's not the same thing it was when I wrote it. I think it has turned into something a little bit better. There's the last song I have to record still. There's a lot that could happen with it because it's kind of an experimental song. I'm gonna mess around a lot with like echoed vocals, or I'm throwing in like a reverse piano part, so it's gonna sound really like kind of funky. But yeah, it's cool. I don't know. You can just do whatever you want. And the cool thing about recording like in parts the way we're doing is that after a session, Scott will send me like the newest version of that song, and then I'll just work on it at home and come up with like my new harmony parts or like the cello parts or whatever. And so we're kind of just, it's like building blocks.
Builds up,
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
It seems neat. Well, is there anything else that we have not yet touched on that you'd like to make sure we get covered in this podcast episode?
Cello at all. I feel like I'm curious about cellos.
Sure. Yeah, I actually, so I played piano the longest and then picked up guitar when I was a teen. And I'd always wanted to take cello lessons because I had a friend that was taking cello lessons, but like we were kind of poor growing up. Couldn't really afford that. And I had to choose. I chose to keep taking piano because that's what I loved. But then once I got to college, I just decided to take lessons. And my first year taking cello, my teacher was gone a lot of the time because he had like carpal tunnel and he was like always dealing with that. So like I did not really learn very much that first year that I played cello. But then we had like a chamber orchestra at my college. I went to Bethany Lutheran College. And we had a little chamber orchestra and they never had enough cellists. And so the director, or conductor, whatever, he reached out. He's like, you should just join. And I was like, I can't play. And he's like, just do it. And so actually getting thrown into chamber orchestra was kind of what taught me how to play cello.
Wow.
It helped that I had played piano before because like I could read bass clef, and like only having to read one staff was really helpful too.
Yeah.
So I just technically I'm not super great, but like I can play some stuff just because I've been doing it. Man, how long have I been playing cello now? Like 8 years or something.
Oh, cool.
I'm not gonna say I'm good, but
Well,
I
you
can
picked it up and can make it work for
Yeah.
your music. That's
Yeah, and
neat.
I played in chamber orchestra all through college, and I still play sometimes. Like alum can come back and play
Oh, fun.
because they still always need people. So it's fun to be able to go back and do that sometimes. I can't do it every semester. It kind of depends on what's going on with my family and like our time commitments and stuff. But I think I've done either 2 or 3 semesters of chamber orchestra since graduating college. So yeah, it's cool. And now being able to like add it to my album is neat.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I have played cello with like other artists a couple times too. It'd be cool to do it more because people always seem to be interested in, oh, you're a cellist, we should play together sometimes. But then it like never happens.
You can sit in with my band sometime if you want.
Sure, that'd be fun.
I guess my other question would be, my final question is if you have any like video game or soundtrack music. You mentioned the Zelda thing and you said you were a game nerd. So like I just wanted to follow up on that. Is there any like particularly good video game soundtracks or like things that get you excited in that corner of like the musical industry?
Yeah, I love any of the Zelda music. It's just so good.
Yeah, the new one is incredible. So many cool moments.
Yeah. Are you talking about
Tears of the Kingdom?
I've
Yeah.
actually been like binging that.
Yeah, same.
It's so good. But yeah, Tears of the Kingdom. And I actually, so when I was in college, I wrote for my theater capstone, I wrote all the music for one of our spring plays. It was called Tell It to the Wind. And that play it took like different like folk tales from around the world. And so there were like, I think 10 different folk tales and kind of all with like similar themes. And for each of the scenes, since they were all taken from like different parts of the world, I decided to try and use like as many different instruments as I could in my compositions, just to kind of represent those stories better. So like there was a story from Japan, and my director had a Chinese gusang, which is like a lap harp thing with a bunch of strings, and like it's got that classic like Asian sound. Like I can't really describe it for you, but you would know it if you heard it. And so like I played that in one of the scenes, and
was this? Did you compose this for a pit orchestra to play, or was this like recorded?
Yeah. So I actually, I did all of like the organizing of the instrumentalists, and I played the whole time.
Cool.
So whether like I played on piano, I played guitar, I played the gusang, I played percussion for some things. I did a lot.
Cool.
And it was really cool to like organize all that and like find the instrumentalists and like schedule the rehearsals. And it was even more cool playing the music live because one thing that theater and video game music has in common is that it's adaptive. So like if you're playing a video game and you're kind of just like derping around in one area for a long time, in order for the music to like change when it's supposed to, it has to be adaptive. So like you go into the next area, oh, the music is changing now. And it's like that for theater, but you have to be watching. Like if you're playing live, you always have to know what's going on in the scene because it's not going to go the same every time. And sometimes, like, what if somebody forgets a line? What if they skip to this other part? Oh, I have to be able to go there in the music now. And so that's like the reason I wanted to do composition for theater, because it's like such a different thing. And that's also one of the things I've always loved about video game music, because it changes.
It needs to work like the fight song needs
Yeah.
to be able to come over like the area song,
Right.
and like the rain or the anything.
Yeah. So yes, Zelda is like a big tangent. I love the Zelda soundtracks. My favorite Zelda soundtrack is probably Twilight Princess. I played that a lot growing up. So that's always just been kind of near and dear to me. I don't know if you've heard of one of my favorite video games. It's like an art game. It's called Journey. And Austin Wintory wrote the music for that, and that is just stunning.
Yeah, it's so ethereal.
Oh, so good.
Yeah.
So
really
I love his work.
It's so cozy too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how like video games and film music, television music these days is like so cinematic and orchestral. It's like an offshoot of classical. It's like modern classical music, which is so cool.
Yeah.
That sound is still alive and thriving,
Yeah.
you know?
Especially when you add DAWs into the equation. Now people can do just absolutely crazy composition.
Yeah.
And like key things to happen at the exact right moment. And yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah.
It's hard to get people to listen nowadays. And like earlier you said you were an album person. I am too. Like it's not hard for me to decide that I want to sit and listen to a musical project. But like,
Same.
if you want someone's undivided attention, I think normally like the way you're going to get it is through a movie or the television.
Yeah.
Or I mean the video game is even more intense. Like people are, hanging on their life.
It's kind of
Right.
funny too, because like if you're doing a good job at stuff like that, people shouldn't notice it unless you're like a nerd like us and that's just like what you pay attention to. But like a good video game music should elevate it, and you don't even know why. You're like, why was that fight so intense? It's probably because of the lighting and the music.
Yeah.
Right. And that's what so the theater music I wrote for that play actually won an award like at a college theater festival.
Nice.
And one of the comments I got from like one of the professional reviewers or whatever, I can't remember, technically what what his title was, or but the when you're writing for theater music, it is that same thing. Like, you're doing a great job if it kind of just blends in with the scene, and you don't necessarily notice it, and it's subtle, and it doesn't like overpower things, because the focus is still the action in the scene, which is the same in the video game. But yeah, finding that balance is so hard but so important.
Like they connect with the character and the setting and not necessarily the song. You actually did a better job, because it's like that was the job of the song, to improve this character, not for everyone to be like, oh, Beret's music is amazing, you know?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, sometimes I do really, I'll go back and watch a movie for the music. If I'm in a scene and I'm like, whoa. Then I'll go back and I'll like pay attention to the soundtrack and what's going on and try harder. But that is, I do notice the soundtrack in a lot of movies, and I also think that some of those classic soundtracks, I think that they're unique because of the tools. Like, everyone knows like the Sonic soundtrack from like the Sega Genesis or whatever. But like imagine only having like 8 voices on one chip to make all of your sounds. Like, that's just, it's so wild how those have become like cultural canon when they had like this super simple synthesizer to work with, and that's it.
I guess it's probably even more important in theater too, because video games and movies have perspective, and really all theater has is like set lighting and music. And that's interesting.
Is there a way that's notated? Like, when someone is to like skip or move or wait, like, do you have like different themes that are like started? Like, what does that look like?
Yeah. So when I wrote the music for that play, it was mostly like I'd have a theme, but it would be in sections, like 4 measures or 8 measures. So a lot of the time you could just keep looping through it, and then go to the next part when it was ready. So like that's one way to make it adaptable. Or sometimes you kind of have to have a little bit of a theory background too. Like if you have to stop abruptly, like when you're not at the end of your loop, or like if you're just in the middle of something and you have to end early, like, oh, how do I transition from this chord into the final chord? How do I make it sound like there's an improvised ending that's not the actual ending, but like in the middle of the music? So you do have to be, if you're playing it at least live, you have to be a little versed in theory, because you have to be ready for anything. Yeah.
Well, that's my video game question.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, where can people find your music if they'd like to listen? And then you can also check the description for the link to the Kickstarter. So we'll throw that in there for you. But
Thank you.
Go ahead with your plugs and let them know where they can find you.
Yeah. So I've got music up on Spotify and like any other streaming platform. And I also have, so that's just like the few songs I've officially released. But I have like a ton of stuff up on SoundCloud.
Oh, cool.
So stuff that I haven't necessarily released, but I've got some theater music up there, like demos of stuff, things that I recorded a long time ago that I like won't release, but it's still there if you want to hear it. So SoundCloud is where you can go if you want to hear everything. Otherwise, your normal streaming platform works.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us on the podcast
Yeah,
today.
thanks for
Great
having
to
me.
meet you.
We're clear.